My mom yelled, "You're just a parasite." Then she tossed out my bags and told me to go. I left without saying a word. 3 weeks later, my dad called in a panic. "Why is our account frozen?" I simply replied, "Ask the parasite." Then chaos erupted. Hey, Reddit. It began on a Tuesday, one of those dull, gray days when the sky feels heavy and the tension seems to cling to your skin. I had just returned home from another miserable day at my temporary job, the kind that barely covers gas, let alone student loans or groceries. I was still living with my parents at 26, not because I was lazy or aimless, but because life had stacked the odds against me from the start. I graduated right into a recession and lost 2 jobs in a row due to layoffs. I tried everything: side jobs, remote work, even manual labor on weekends. I paid rent, bought my own food, and contributed to utilities whenever I could. But none of that ever seemed to matter to my mom. That day, I walked into a battlefield. My mom was already waiting in the living room, arms crossed, her face twisted in that familiar scowl that told me I wasn't getting through the next 5 minutes without a verbal attack. She didn't even wait for me to set my bag down. She just launched into it, accusing me of mooching off them, of being a grown man without pride, of dragging the family down. I tried to explain that I was actively applying for better jobs, going to interviews, that I was genuinely trying, but she didn't want to hear it. She shouted that I was just a parasite living off them, as if I was some pest draining her life away. Then, in one furious motion, she grabbed the duffel bag I kept by the closet, stuffed with emergency clothes, and hurled it out the front door like it was garbage. My dad didn't say anything. He sat at the dining table, pretending to read the newspaper, his knuckles white as he gripped the edges. I locked eyes with him for a moment, just a moment, and in that instant, I knew I couldn't stay. There was nothing left to fight for. No home to hold on to, no warmth in that house. So I picked up my bag, looked at both of them, and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout back. I just left. And that silence unnerved them more than any argument ever could. The days that followed were odd. There was a kind of peace in being away from that house. Even though I was sleeping on a friend's couch without a real plan, I woke up early, applied for jobs, took walks to clear my mind, and finally let myself breathe. For the first time in months, I wasn't tiptoeing around. I wasn't getting glared at during dinner or side-eyed during commercials featuring successful people buying homes and driving luxury cars. My friend Caleb didn't pry much. He just handed me a blanket and a spare key and let me be. We talked sometimes mostly about music or old memories, but not about my mom or dad. That topic felt toxic, like mentioning them would send me spiraling. But deep inside, a quiet anger was building. I kept asking myself, how did I end up being treated like the issue in a house where I did nothing but try? What really broke me wasn't the words my mom shouted. It was the years behind them. The years I spent being the dependable one. The son who fixed their phones, managed their online bills, set up their streaming accounts, printed their tickets, taught them how to send emails, and never once asked for recognition. I didn't party. I didn't bring trouble home. I just kept my head down and did what I believed was right. Yet somehow I was still viewed as a burden. When my younger brother crashed his car while drunk last year, they bailed him out and said boys make mistakes. When my older sister dropped out of college and moved around to 3 different cities in a year, they supported her pursuit of her dreams. But I was the one who got labeled a parasite for needing time to recover after being chewed up and spit out by a system that promised opportunity but delivered disappointment. So, while they slept soundly in their ignorance, I took the quiet steps necessary to untangle myself from their lives. I logged into our shared bank account. Yes, shared. When I moved back home, my dad wanted me to help manage bills, so I became a secondary account holder with full access. It was meant to make things easier, and for years it did. But now it was the last thread tying me to them, and I couldn't let it dangle. I removed myself from the account with proper verification, flagged a couple of questionable automatic payments they never noticed, and requested the bank freeze all pending changes until the primary account holder, my dad, confirmed them. It was simple cybersecurity. But to them, it would feel like a grenade exploding in their finances. 3 weeks after the blow-up, the call came. I was in Caleb's kitchen reheating leftover pasta when my phone started buzzing. It was my dad. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, uncertain if I even wanted to answer. I let it ring. On the 3rd call, I picked up. His voice was frantic, high-pitched in a way I hadn't heard since Grandma's funeral. "Why is our account frozen? Why can't I pay the bills? What the hell did you do? I could hear my mom shouting in the background, furious and blaming him, blaming me, blaming everyone but herself. I let him rant for almost 2 full minutes. Then I calmly said, "Ask the parasite," and hung up. The silence afterward was blissful, but I knew that wouldn't be the end of it. 2 days later, I received an email. Their lawyer claimed I had caused disruption. Apparently, I had weaponized access. They were trying to twist the story and portray me as some tech-savvy manipulator who intentionally harmed his poor aging parents. I laughed, literally laughed. Then I spent the next hour pulling screenshots, email threads, bank access logs. Every bit of proof that showed I hadn't touched a single cent that wasn't mine. My lawyer reviewed it and told me I was fine, that they had no case. Legally, I was in the clear, but that didn't ease the ache in my chest. It was hard to believe they'd rather take me to court than just pick up the phone and apologize, that they'd weaponize the system to try and bury me instead of confronting their own cruelty. That night, I stood outside on Caleb's tiny balcony, staring at the city lights, thinking about all the years I bent over backward for their approval. All the birthdays I spent fixing Wi-Fi. All the times I sat through arguments, silently absorbing blame for things I never caused. And now I was finally out, but I didn't feel free. Not yet, because something told me this was just the beginning. They pushed me, and I'd finally pushed back. But I knew my mom wouldn't let this end in silence. She needed someone to destroy. This time, she had chosen me. But what she didn't realize was that I had chosen myself too. And I was ready for what came next. The fallout came faster than I expected. 1 minute, I was the so-called parasite living under their roof, unworthy of basic respect. And the next, I was public enemy number 1, dragged through group chats, whispered about by extended family, and painted as the ungrateful son who turned against his own blood. I didn't even know how quickly gossip spread in our family until my cousin Sarah texted me in a panic, asking if I really emptied my parents' bank account and vanished. That was when I realized my parents weren't just angry. They were rewriting the story. In their version, I was the villain, not the struggling son who worked himself to the bone. Not the one who kept their finances afloat when they didn't understand how online banking even worked, but a monster who destroyed everything out of spite. It was surreal. I watched the narrative twist and mutate like a virus. One aunt blocked me on Facebook. Another left a passive-aggressive voicemail about how family should stick together even when it's tough. I didn't respond. I didn't have to because for the first time in my life, I had proof, real hard evidence of every bill I paid, every login I made, every notification I sent them. I compiled it all into a folder titled, "In Case They Try Anything," and kept it backed up in 3 places. But I didn't share it, not yet. Because while they were busy spinning their web of lies, I had something better than revenge. I had direction. And I had finally landed a job. It wasn't just any job either. It was a solid IT position at a mid-sized firm. Nothing glamorous, but steady, secure, and exactly what I'd been working toward. I accepted the offer with a quiet smile, packed up Caleb's couch, and moved into a small but decent apartment with just enough space for my computer, a mattress, and a table. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one could throw me out of it. No one could call me a burden in my own home. And as I stood in that empty living room on my first night, surrounded by silence, I realized that this was peace. Not the kind that comes from people tolerating you, but the kind you build for yourself when the world turns its back and you keep walking. Meanwhile, my parents were imploding. I didn't even have to ask. Word spread quickly. My dad's business account had been linked to the frozen personal account, and without access, he missed 2 vendor payments. His credit line got flagged. His car lease was rejected. They were scrambling, drowning in confusion, and still too proud to admit the mess they were in was partly their own doing. They never called to apologize. Never once asked if I was okay. But then one day, something changed. I received a call, not from my dad or my mom, but from my sister. The same sister who once laughed when I got fired, who used to mock me for not moving out. Her voice on the line was thin, quieter than I'd ever heard it. She said, "Dad was in the hospital, stress-induced heart palpitations. He collapsed during a client meeting and was rushed to the ER. The doctors said he was lucky. It could have been worse." Just like that, the fury I'd carried in my chest for weeks wavered because he might have sat there and let Mom throw me out without saying a word, but he was still my father. He'd been weak, yes, but not malicious, unlike her. I thanked my sister, asked which hospital, and debated going. In the end, I didn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew my presence would only ignite another firestorm. Instead, I did the one thing none of them expected. I sent flowers. No note, no message, just white lilies, the same kind he sent me when I graduated. And that silence, that small, unexpected gesture, cracked something open. 2 days later, my dad texted. No accusations, no blame, just a message that read, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve what happened. Can we talk?" I stared at that message for a long time. My instinct was to ignore it to protect the fragile peace I'd built. But then I thought of the man who used to sneak me extra cash when Mom cut my allowance, the one who stayed up helping me with algebra even though he barely passed high school, the man who, when sober and quiet, once told me I was the smartest person he knew. So I agreed to meet him alone. We sat across from each other at a quiet diner. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. The silence between us was thick but not angry, just heavy. He apologized again, said he should have stood up for me, that he let his fear of confrontation turn him into a coward. I told him I appreciated the apology, but I also didn't know if I could ever go back, not just to the house, but to that dynamic. He nodded. He didn't argue. Then he told me something that changed everything. He said that after I left, the house changed. My mom became meaner, harsher. She snapped at him, at everyone, over nothing. It wasn't until I was gone that he saw how much I had held the house together. Quietly, invisibly, he said he finally realized I wasn't the parasite. I was the glue. It hit me harder than I expected. A week later, my mom reached out. Not with an apology, not with humility, but with a long, meandering message about how family is complicated and how things were said in the heat of the moment. She never took responsibility. She never said the word sorry, just made excuses, deflected, and tried to instill guilt. I left her on read because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Some wounds don't heal with words. They heal with distance. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've rebuilt everything. I got promoted at work. I bought a decent secondhand car. I furnished my apartment piece by piece. I started therapy. I even joined a local community group and made a few real friends. Every night, I go to bed in a place I earned, a place no one can throw me out of. My dad and I text sometimes. He's trying. I see it, and I respect that. We're not what we once were, but maybe someday we'll be something better. As for my mom, I've made peace with the fact that she may never see me clearly. And that's okay because I've stopped living for her approval. I'm not a parasite. I never was. And now I'm finally free.